Hello, and welcome to this live read of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nimh. Today we'll be reading chapters 16 and 17 of the book. So let's begin, shall we? Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nimh by Robert C. O'Brien. Chapter 16, The Maze. During the days that followed, our lives fell into a pattern, and the reason for our captivity gradually became clear. Dr. Schultz was a neurologist, that is, an expert on brains, nerves, intelligence, and how people learn things. He hoped by experimenting on us to find out whether certain injections could help us to learn more and faster. The two younger people working with him, George and Julie, were graduate students in biology. Watch always, he told them, for signs of improvement. Faster learning, quicker reaction in Group A as compared to Group B, and both as compared to the control group. My own training began on the day after the first injections. It was George who did it. I suppose Julie and Dr. Schultz were doing the same tests to the other rats. He took my cage from the shelf and carried it to another room, similar to the first one, but with more equipment in it, and no shelves or cages. He placed the cage in a slot against a wall, slid open the door, opened a matching door in the wall, and I was free. Or so I thought. The small doorway in the wall led into a short corridor, which opened, or seemed to, directly onto a green lawn. I could see it clearly, and behind it some bushes, and behind them a street, all outdoors, and nothing but air between me and them. Furthermore, I could smell the fresh outdoor breeze blowing in. Were they letting me go? I made a dash toward the open end of the corridor and then jumped back. I could not go on. About 2 feet from my cage, there was something dreadfully wrong with the floor. When I touched my feet to it, a terrible prickly feeling came over my skin. My muscles cramped, my eyes blurred, and I got instantly dizzy. I never got used to that feeling. No one ever does. But I did experience it many times, and eventually learned what it was. Electric shock. It's not exactly a pain, but it is unbearable. Yet I was in a frenzy to reach the open lawn, to run for the bushes, to get away from the cage. I tried again and jumped back again. No use. And then I saw, leading off to the left, another corridor. I hadn't noticed it at first because I had been looking so eagerly in the open end of one I was in. The second one seemed to stop about 5 feet away in a blank wall. Yet there was light there. It must turn a corner. I ran down it, cautiously, not trusting the floor, and at the end it turned right. And there was the lawn again, another opening. I got closer this time, just as I thought I was going to make it. Another shock. I pulled back and saw that there was still another corridor, leading off to the right. Again I ran, and again I saw the open escape hole, and again I was stopped by shock. This was repeated over and over, yet each time I seemed to get a little closer to freedom. But when I finally reached it, and the grass was only a step away, a wire wall snapped down in front of me, another behind me, the ceiling opened above me, and a gloved hand reached in and picked me up. A voice said, 4 minutes and 37 seconds. It was George. I had, after all my running through the corridors, emerged into a trap only a few feet from where I had started, and through a concealed opening up above, George had been watching everything I did. I had been in what is called a maze, a device to test intelligence and memory. I was put in it many times again, and so were the others. The second time I got through it a little faster, because I remembered, to some extent, which corridors had electric floors and which didn't. The third time I was still faster, and after each trial, George would write down how long it took. You might ask, why would I bother to run through it at all, if I knew it was only a trick? The answer is I couldn't help it. When you've lived in a cage, you can't bear not to run, even if what you're running towards is an illusion. There are more injections and other kinds of tests, and some of these were more important than the maze, because the maze was designed only to find out how quickly we could learn, while some of the others actually taught us things, or at least led to actual teaching. One was what Dr. Schultz called shape recognition. We would be put into a small room with 3 doors leading out, one round, one square, and one triangular. These doors are on hinges with springs that held them shut, but they are easy to push open, and each door led into another room with 3 more doors like the first. But the trick was this: if you went through the wrong door, the room you entered had an electric floor, and you got a shock, so you had to learn. In the first room, you used the brown door, second room, the triangle, and so on. All of these activities helped to pass the time, and the weeks went by quickly, but they did not lessen our longing to get away. I wished for my old home in the storm sewer. I wished I could see my mother and father and run with my brother to the marketplace. I knew all the others felt the same way, yet it seemed a hopeless thing. Still, there was one rat who decided to try it anyway. He was a young rat, probably the youngest of all that had been caught, and by chance he was in a cage next to mine. I might mention that, like Jenner and me, he was in the group that Dr. Schultz called A. His name was Justin. It was late one night when I heard him calling to me, speaking softly, around the wooden partition between our cages. Those partitions generally kept us all from getting to know each other as well as we might have done, and discouraged us from talking much to one another. It was quite hard to hear around them, and of course you could never see the one who you were talking to. I think Dr. Schultz had purposely had them made of some soundproof material, but you could hear if you and your neighbor got in the corner of the cages nearest each other and spoke out through the wire front. "Nicodemus." "Yes?" I went over to the corner. "How long have we been here?" "You mean since the beginning? Since we were caught?" "Yes." "I don't know. Several months, I think, but I have no way to keep track." "I know. I don't either. Do you suppose it's winter outside now?" "Probably. Or late fall." "It will be cold." "But not in here." "No. But I'm going to try to get out." "Get out? But how? Your cage is shut." Tomorrow we get injections, so they'll open it. When they do, I'm going to run." "Run where?" "I don't know. At least I'll get a look around. There might be some way out. What can I lose?" "Well, you might get hurt." "I don't think so. They don't want to hurt me." By they, he meant Dr. Schultz and the other 2. He added, confidently, "All those shots, all the time that they've spent, were too valuable to them now. They'll be careful." The idea had not occurred to me before, but when I thought about it, I decided he was right. Dr. Schultz, Julie, and George had spent most of their working hours with us for months. They could not afford to let any harm come to us. On the other hand, neither could they afford to allow any of us to escape. Justin made his attempt the next morning, and it did cause a certain amount of excitement, but not at all what we expected. It was Julie who opened Justin's cage with a hypodermic in her hand. Justin was out with a mighty leap. He hit the floor almost 4 feet down. With a thump, he shook himself and ran, disappearing from my view, heading toward the other end of the room. Julie seemed not at all alarmed. She calmly placed the needle on a shelf, then walked to the door of the laboratory and pushed a button on the wall near it. A red light came on over the door. She picked up a notebook and pencil from a desk near the door and followed Justin out of my sight. A few minutes later, Dr. Schultz and George entered. They opened the door cautiously and closed it behind them. "The outer door is shut too," said Dr. Schultz. "Where is it?" "Down here," said Julie, "inspecting the air ducts." "Really? Which one is it?" "It's one of the A group, just as you expected. Number 9. I'm keeping notes on him." Obviously, the red light was some kind of a warning signal, both outside and in. The laboratory animal at large. Not only had Dr. Schultz known one of us was out, but he had expected it to happen. "A few days sooner than I thought," he was saying. "But so much the better. Do you realize—" "Look," said Julie. "He's doing the whole baseboard, but he's studying the windows too. See how he steps back to look up?" "Of course," said Dr. Schultz. And at the same time, he's watching us too, can't you see? He's pretty cool about it, said George. Can you imagine one of the lab rats doing that? Or even one of the controls? We've got to try and grasp what we have on our hands. The A group is now 300% ahead of the control group in learning and getting smarter all the time. B group is only 20% ahead. It's the new DNA that's doing it. We have a real breakthrough, and since it's DNA, we may very well have a true mutation, a brand new species of rat. But we've got to be careful with it. I think we should go ahead now with the next injection series. The steroids? Yes. It may slow them up a little, though I doubt it, but even if it does, it'll be worth it. Because I'm betting it will increase their lifespan by double at least, maybe more. Maybe much more. Look, said Julie. A9 has made a discovery. He's found the mice. George said, see how he's studying them? Probably, said Dr. Schultz-Riley. He's wondering if they're ready for their steroid injections too. As a matter of fact, I think the G group is. They're doing almost as well as the A group. Should I get the net and put him back? George asked. I doubt that you'll need it, Dr. Schultz said. Now that he's learned he can't get out. But they were underestimating Justin. He had learned no such thing. A lesson in reading. Of course, Justin did not escape that day, nor even that year. When they put on a glove and went to pick him up, he submitted meekly enough, and in a short time he was back in his cage. Yet he had learned some things. He had, as Julie noticed, examined the air ducts, the opening along the wall through which warm air flowed in winter, cool air in summer, and he had studied the windows. Mainly he had learned that he could, occasionally at least, jump from his cage and wander around without incurring any anger or injury. All of this eventually was important, for it was Justin, along with Jenner, who finally figured out how to get away. I had a part in it too, but all that came later. I won't go into details about the rest of our training, except for one part of it that was the most useful of all. But in general, during the months that followed, two things were happening. First, we were learning more than any rats ever had before, and were becoming more intelligent than any rats had ever been. The second thing could be considered, from some points of view, even more important, and certainly more astonishing than the first. Dr. Schultz had said that the new series of injections might increase our lifespan by double or more, yet even he was not prepared for what happened. Perhaps it was the odd combination of both types of injections working together. I don't know, and neither did he, but the result was that as far as he could detect in the A group, the aging process seemed to stop almost completely. For example, during the years that we were in the laboratory, most of the rats in the control group grew old and sickly and finally died. So did those in B group. For though they were getting injections too, the formula was not the same as ours. But among the 20 of us in A group, no one could see any signs that we were growing older at all. Apparently, though we seldom saw them, the same thing was happening with the G group, the mice, who were getting the same injections we were. Dr. Schultz was greatly excited about this. The short lifespan has always been a prime limiting factor in education, he told George and Julie. If we can double it and speed up the learning process at the same time, the possibilities are enormous. Double it. Even now, years later, years after the injections were stopped, we seem scarcely older than we were then. We couldn't detect either of these things ourselves. That is, we didn't feel any different, and since we had no contact with the other groups, we had no basis for comparison. All we had to go by was what Dr. Schultz said. He and the others were preparing a research paper about us. He published it in some scientific journal. So each morning, he dictated the results of the previous day's tests into a tape recorder. We heard all of it, though there was a lot of technical stuff that we couldn't understand, especially at first. Until the paper was published, the whole experiment was to be kept secret. The one important phase of training began one day after weeks of really hard work at the shape recognition that I mentioned before, but this was different. For the first time, they used sounds along with the shapes and pictures, real pictures we could recognize. For example, one of the first and simplest of these exercises was a clear photograph of a rat. I suppose I felt sure that we knew what that was. This picture was shown on a screen with a light behind it. Then, after I looked at the picture and recognized it, a shape flashed on the screen under it. A sort of half circle and two straight lines, not like anything I had seen before. Then the voice began. R, R, R. It was Julie's voice, speaking very clearly, but it had a tinny sound. It was a record. After repeating R a dozen times or so, the particular shape disappeared. Another one came on the screen, and still under the picture of the rat, it was a triangle with legs on it. And Julie's voice began again. A, A, A. When that shape disappeared, the third one came up on the screen. This one was a cross, and Julie's voice said, T, T, T. Then all three shapes appeared at once, and the record said, R, A, T, rat. You will already have recognized what was going on. They were teaching us to read. The symbols under the picture were the letters R, A, T, but the idea did not become clear to me nor to any of us for quite a long time, because, of course, we didn't know what reading was. Oh, we learned to recognize the shapes easily enough, and when I saw the rat picture, I knew straight away what symbols would appear beneath it. In the same way, when the picture showed a cat, I knew the same shapes would appear, except the first one would be a half circle, and Julie's voice would repeat, C, C, C. I even learned that when the photograph showed not only one but several rats, a fourth shape would appear, under it a snaky line, and the sound with that one was S, S, S. But as to what all that was for, none of us had any inkling. It was Jenner who finally figured it out. By the time he had developed a sort of system of communication, a simple enough thing, just passing spoken messages from one cage to the next, like passing notes in school. Justin, who was still next to me, called to me another day. Message for Nicodemus from Jenner. He says important. All right, I said, what's the message? Look at the shapes on the wall next to the door. He says to look carefully. My cage, like Jenner and those of the rest of the A group, was close enough to the door so that I could see what he meant. Near the doorway there was a large square piece of white cardboard fastened to the wall, a sign. It was covered with an assortment of black markings to which I had never paid any attention, though they had always been there. But now, for the first time, I looked at them carefully, and I grasped what Jenner had discovered. The top line of black marks on the wall were instantly familiar. R-A-T-S. As soon as I saw them, I thought of the picture that went with them, and as soon as I did that, I was, for the first time, reading. Because, of course, that's what reading is. Using symbols to suggest a picture or an idea. From that time on, it gradually became clear to me what all those lessons were for. Once I understood the idea, I was eager to learn more. I could scarcely wait for the next lesson, and the next. The whole concept of reading to me was, at least, fascinating. I remember how proud I was when, months later, I was able to read and understand the whole sign. I read it 100 times, and I will never forget it. Rats may not be removed from the laboratory without written permission. And at the bottom, in smaller letters, the word NIMH. But then a puzzling thing came up, a thing we're still not sure about even now. Apparently, Dr. Schultz, who was running the lessons, did not realize how well they were succeeding. He continued the training with new words and new pictures every day, but the fact is, once we had grasped the idea and learned the different sounds each letter stood for, we leaped way ahead of him. I remember well, during one of the lessons, looking at a picture of a tree. Under it, the letters flashed on T-R-E-E. But in the photograph, though, the tree was in the foreground. There was a building in the background and a sign near it. I scarcely glanced at the tree, but concentrated instead on reading the sign. It said, NIMH, private parking, by permit only, reserved for doctors and staff. No visitor parking. The building behind it, tall and white, looked very much like the building we were in. I'm sure Dr. Schultz had plans for testing our reading ability. I could even guess from the words he was teaching us what the tests were going to be like. For example, he taught us left, right, door, food, open, and so on. It wasn't hard to imagine the test. I would be placed in one chamber, my food in another. There would be 2 doors and a sign saying, for food, open door at right, or something like that. Then if any of us moved unerringly toward the proper door, he would know we understood the sign. As I said, I'm sure he planned to do this, but apparently he did not think we were ready for it yet. I think maybe even he was a little afraid to try it, because if he did too soon, or for any other reason it didn't work, his experiment would be a failure. He wanted to be sure. His caution was his undoing. Justin announced one evening around the partition, I'm going to get out of my cage tonight and wander around a bit. How can you? It's locked. Yes, but did you notice along the bottom edge there's a printed strip? I hadn't noticed it. I should perhaps explain that when Dr. Schultz and the others opened our cages, we could never quite see how they did it. They manipulated something under the plastic door, something we couldn't see. What does it say? I've been trying to read it the last 3 times they brought me back from training. It's a very small print, but I think I finally made it out. It says, to release door, pull knob forward and slide right. Knob? Under the floor, about an inch back, there's a metal thing just in front of the shelf. I think that's the knob. I think I can reach it through the wire. Anyway, I'm going to try. Now? No, not until they close up. Closing up was a ritual that Dr. Schultz, George, and Julie went through each night. For about an hour, they sat at their desks, wrote notes and books, filed papers in cabinets, and then finally locked the cabinets. Then they checked all the cages, dimmed the lights, locked the doors, and went home, leaving us alone in the still laboratory. About half an hour after they left that night, Justin said, I'm going to try now. I heard a scuffling noise, a click, and a scrape of metal. And in a matter of seconds, I saw his door swinging open. It was simple as that, when you could read. Wait, I said. What's the matter? If you jump down, you won't be able to get back in. They'll know that you were out. I thought of that. I'm not going to jump down. I'm going to climb on the outside of the cage. It's easy. I've climbed up the inside 1,000 times. Above these cages, there's another shelf and it's empty. I'm going to walk along there and see what I can see. I think there's a way to climb to the floor and up again. Why don't I go with you? My door would open the same way as his. Better not this time, don't you think? If something goes wrong and I can't go back, they'll say, oh, it's just A9 again. But if 2 of us are found outside, they'll take it seriously. They might put new locks on the cages. He was right, and you can see that already we both have the same idea in mind, that this might be the first step toward escape for all of us. Well, that's the end of the chapter. Come back at 1:30 tomorrow. We'll read the next 2 chapters of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nimh by Robert C. O'Brien. I hope you've enjoyed this reading, and I hope you can get out later today and enjoy some of the sunny weather once this rain passes. Hope you all are healthy and safe, and I'll see you next time.